I I think we're coming closer than in this conversation than any system I've ever heard of or thought of for something that incentivizes innovation, even amongst people who start with very little capital within the system.
This is a conversation I had with Robert Reed, the founder and head innovation coach at an organization called Public Invention, who, among many other things, was also one of the founding presidential innovation fellows at the White House in the Obama administration. This discussion revolved around the mechanics of incentivizing innovation within open systems. And we come a long way during this conversation, ending it with concrete next steps on how to take these ideas further.
And that's one place where Public Invention and Dev4X might kind of be approaching the same thing, but from different positions. I think you're an educator, and Public Invention is not an educational organization.
Right.
But we offer tremendous educational opportunity in sort of project-based learning.
Yeah.
I think you're focused on education and you're doing projects to accomplish the education. We're focused on projects, and education is a side effect of the projects that we're doing.
It's funny because I'm far more aligned to your way of thinking on this, is that education should be a byproduct of you actually going ahead and doing stuff, as opposed to you learning the theory and then once you're 26 and out of college, only then starting to do the practical. So I'm much more leaning towards your end of the spectrum.
One of the problems in our society is you can get people to say, I see the value in my kids learning algebra, so I'll pay you $10,000 to teach 30 kids algebra.
Yeah.
It's much harder to convince people to say, if we try to build an electronic circuit, your kids will learn, first of all, basic electronics, and then the algebra necessary to compute this resistor network.
Yeah.
People think that's more specialized.
Right,
but
you're right.
What you're really teaching people is how to learn something new, right? Because nothing you teach in high school is really going to be used very much anyway.
Exactly.
Even though I'm a huge fan of algebra, to me, algebra is the basis of so many things. But I was highly, highly motivated to learn algebra, based on problems that I was working on for other reasons.
Yeah. So I guess just for getting things started, I have started recording.
Okay.
What I want to do, and I'll just give a bit of an intro in why I wanted to have this call with you, and why I'm doing this as a recorded session as well, and why I'm writing the book the way I'm writing the book is, and you mentioned this in the email. So I messaged you telling you that I'm writing a book about open innovation and I'm exploring different ideas, and you messaged back saying that you've looked at a bit of it and you recommended that this was probably not the right approach when exploring new ideas. Like writing a book is not the medium through which you should be exploring new ideas, and I get that, and this is where I think it needs a little bit more clarity in that I'm intentionally trying to figure things out as I go. I don't know the answers. And the idea I've got is very much the way that I feel open innovation should work is let's put something out there. This is the idea. I'm not going to keep it to myself. I'm going to say this, I'm going to put a stake in the ground, so to speak, and say, what I think this way of doing things is going to work. This is what I think is going to be the outcome. Like this is the input, right? So this is the input. This is what I expect the output to be, and this is the process by which you convert the input to the output. And that's what I think. And then I put it out there, and then everyone shoots it down, or I don't know what the case may be. But that's the goal. And I think what is nice about doing it that way is it's both an example of what open innovation does, but also shows what can be done when you build things like Lego, very modular, in that with Lego, when you start building your Lego model and you get halfway through and you figure out, you know what, that component in the middle is not the way I want to actually build this model. Let me take that out and replace it with another brick. That's only possible when you first of all you're open and honest about your ideas being potentially wrong. But two, also when you structure your ideas with clear inputs and outputs. And traditionally, like a traditional book is you can think of it as a bunch of Lego bricks glued together, kind of like the movie Lego, where Lord, what was his name? Lord Business glues the Lego bricks together, right? This is now set. You can't break it down. But that's not the way I'd like to write the book. It's about creating an idea, throwing it out there, and getting people to help me formulate that idea, then throwing it out there, building it out, testing it out, and seeing what happens. And if we need to replace that chapter in the book 10 months down the line, we'll just do that. And so the book becomes a living, breathing thing that is open source and yeah.
Well, first of all, let me apologize if I was at all negative. I hate people who are naysayers, although I may have been one.
No, not at all.
Caught me at a bad time. You know, when someone says something, you know, if someone criticizes an idea, it's sort of incumbent upon them to suggest an alternative.
Yeah.
And I don't remember that email actually, but you know, the way I would be tempted to approach this, and unfortunately, this is an example of if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I would try to write a very simple software system that would model what you were talking about, and that could be a companion to the book.
Yeah.
You know, because I can write software very quickly, and so to me, that seems like it would give you something that would be easier to play with, because I think there have been examples of people who wrote books that suggested radical new ideas and they caught fire, but there are plenty of examples of people who suggested radical ideas and 30 years later people realize, oh, someone suggested this 30 years ago and no one paid attention.
Right.
And the worst thing that could happen to your book would not be that people criticize it. It's simply that no one responds to it at all.
Yeah.
Which has happened to all of us, I think, you know.
Yeah.
So that's one possibility. And by the way, that's the kind of thing I wouldn't mind putting a little bit of time into, you know, in just a simple way. And maybe we could even come up with like a game or like a simple, you know, something that was relatively easy to do. And one of the interesting things that I thought your work already expressed was, and I think you expressed it in terms of kind of like a cryptographic coin or something, but you don't have to think of it that way. That's obviously one implementation. If you build a network of Lego bricks, right? And by definition, you have inputs and outputs. By definition, your new thing has inputs and outputs, right? The outputs that aren't tied up by the first thing are outputs of the final thing.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting question is, if you put something in, how does it flow throughout the system?
Yeah.
And the two interesting things in my mind are money and gratitude, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, like if someone built let's say it did something useful but of small scale, like it made a beautiful fractal screensaver.
Yeah.
That was all it did. Okay. But you know, I might say, wow, that's worth $1 to me. I'll give $1 to the network. Okay. Now, what you're saying is $1 should flow into the bricks based on how much they were valued. And I don't know if this would be true, but suppose there were some very hungry programmers, you know, sitting there kind of waiting for money, right? Then, you know, programmer A might get 5 cents based on how much they contributed to which brick, and programmer B might get sixth sense, based on
Yeah.
having done a little bit more, right? And the other way of thinking about that, of course, is sometimes money is clunky for those kinds of things. For some things, it's very important, but for other things, it's kind of clunky. But you could just sort of say, well, I value this, 10 hearts or 10 love points, right? And then I, as a programmer, I'm happy. It's like someone says, oh, you get, based on your value to this network, you get 2 love points, so I feel loved. We can all see examples of how powerful the profit motive is. It can create Lamborghinis, it can create really magnificent machines, right? But if you can free yourself from that, you can also create other things where almost no money has ever changed hands and they're even more magnificent, like the Wikipedia.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like it's on a financial scale, it's tiny, right? The money to run it is tiny, but the value provided by it is tremendous. Tremendous. If you multiply by what people like you or I would be willing to pay by 335 million Americans, it's incredibly valuable every single year, and that's just America, not counting all the rest of the world.
Right.
And yet that whole thing was constructed with almost no money changing hands. Ever. And of course, in the case of the bacteria, it's not that the bacteria are being altruistic. As you said, they're not actually thinking. So they're neither being greedy nor altruistic. But they do have a low transaction cost.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they also have something that we don't have. If they die, they can be replaced easily because they have a rapid reproduction rate,
Right. Yeah.
But maybe if we could think of it this way, for a human being, you take a weekend off. If your work is unappreciated, you lose the weekend. If your work is appreciated, you get another weekend, right? Or you get 10 weekends, right? Or something. So that what's comfortable for a human being is to die on a very small scale, like in a computer game. It's like, oh, lost a life, I got to have another life and build myself back up again. But like that's okay, right? We don't want to lose the big life, but we don't mind losing the symbolic little life. So it might be entirely possible to do that. And the other thing that's interesting to me about what you said, which many mathematical structures don't properly represent because they're too clean, is what you might call the soup in which everything swims. Technically that might be called epigenetics, or it might be called the extracellular matrix. There are different ways of thinking about that. But if you think about, when I think about like let's say a bunch of young people using innovation bricks and they're building things. Now, as a computer scientist and a mathematician, I would tend to look at the process and I'd say fabric goes in and tiger mask come out, right? Like let's say we build that kind of thing. But you don't want to look just at the process, right? Because there are other things like scraps of cloth that are output, but they're also within the system. And if someone builds an innovation brick to use the scraps of cloth, which if you're not careful, you would exclude from your diagram, right? Like you wouldn't model that, right? Then you're opening up opportunities that wouldn't be there if you designed too perfect a system. It's very difficult to build computer science and mathematical structures that capture that messiness. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't make a stab at it, right?
And you also raised an important point there, and we briefly started to discuss this on our previous call, and maybe we can explore this further. You're absolutely right that market economics and the profit incentive has created some miraculous things like the Lamborghini, for example. And then completely open source, no money motive behind it has also created something miraculous. An example was a Wikipedia. And I think there's also the middle ground. I don't have it fully flushed out, especially not the market mechanics behind everything, but the idea that you openly share all the work that you do, all the contributions you make. You openly share that work on a platform where anybody else can use that work and leverage that work. But every time you contribute to the work that you're putting in, you're getting tokens in that piece of work. And then if someone else uses that, that's fine. They can use it and they can copy and fork it. And if they do so, they then share back with you some of the tokens that are now in their copy of that piece of work. So that, let's say your work doesn't go anywhere because maybe you never were lucky. You're never lucky. You didn't have the right connections. You were never at the right place at the right time. However, this other person was at the right place at the right time, but half of their work is using work that you've done. The reward mechanism there is still in place, in that you own 50%, or at least at that stage, you own 50% of the work that they do, simply because they grabbed your work and made a copy of it. And obviously the tokens and the shares within this work will continually dilute, right? Which I think is a good mechanism, in that if the tokens within a piece of work continually dilute as more and more people contribute to it, it makes it a lot fairer, and it incentivizes you to continually update your work. And I keep thinking about Mark Zuckerberg, who still owns 50% or somewhere close to that of Facebook. And the argument is, yeah, but he put the money in, he had the most amount of risk, and he should be rewarded fairly for that. And my response to that is that people should be rewarded for the work that they put in, and the work that they put in. If we look at Facebook at the moment, we could calculate the amount of value that Zuckerberg puts in is a fraction of a percentage of the total amount of value being put in. A millionth of a percent if you take into account all of the users that are actually generating the most of the value. But that's still fine, given in that I think it's a far fairer model to be rewarded for the continual work you put in. The question that I have for you is how, and maybe this is something really cool that we could try and simulate, is if we were to build a simulation of an open ecosystem where we share work and we exchange tokens, and we see some projects flourish and some projects not flourish. Can someone still attain mass, like significant wealth by, for example, let's say I'm a genius in a very niche go-to-market strategy for X or Y type of product. However, and that's all I do. I just design this go-to-market strategy, and that's all I do. And traditionally, I would probably get paid a salary of $50,000 or $60,000 by one company to do that work. But the work that I'm doing is really valuable. And now, instead of me just working for one company, that go-to-market strategy is being used by 10,000 different companies. Mm-hmm. And each 10,000 different companies are only paying me $1 per day, or whatever the case may be. It would be interesting to simulate that, to see whether or not the distribution of wealth is if there are any things that we're not looking, if there's any flaws in the logic, in that there will be a fair distribution of wealth in that type of simulated environment.
Well, you could certainly do interesting experiments with it. You know, one of the things that I this is changing what you're saying a little bit, but it's looking at it from a different point of view. Okay,
Okay.
so if you think about something like Facebook, to some extent, it is a closed system, which allows a founder to sort of extract rents. Right now, maybe everybody's participating in a voluntary way. The employees are not slaves; they chose to take on their salary,
Yeah.
but you know, in what we think of as a modern successful venture, it makes more money than the cost of the salaries, and a lot of that money goes to the owners of the firm rather than the people who are putting the input in.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you could argue if that's fair or it's not fair. It seems to me that's a little bit of a losing argument to do that. You know,
Yeah.
let's think about innovation bricks a little differently, where you basically say, let's say there is no scarcity. Maybe we're in a little bitty box where there is no scarcity. And so
Right.
basically everything is luxury. It's all just, everything is just luxury. Anyone can walk away. And if they walk away, they're not going to starve. You know, it's
Yeah.
all there. Now, when an innovation brick is used in a closed system, someone can say, well, you can't use my innovation brick unless you give me 20 BOGO bucks, right?
Right.
Because it's closed system. I have the right to deny you the use of this. But I
Yeah.
think where you're going, and in a luxurious environment, you would say, well, I don't have that right. I published it under this license. You have the right to use it. But I would like some BOGO bucks. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, how many BOGO bucks are you going to give me out of the kindness of your heart for the use of this innovation brick? Okay. Now, surprisingly, some people will give you some BOGO bucks. Okay. Now, if we all had to buy, calories with our BOGO bucks, people wouldn't, because we need it to survive. But, you go to shows in Austin, Texas, and sometimes it's pay what you will at the door.
Yeah.
And I don't think, someone's willing to put on the show for whatever they think they're going to get. Right. So I think it's, especially in an artificial system, divorced from reality, it would totally work. Okay. So now, basically, the person is not in the position of someone who like has a ton of rice that people really need because they're hungry. They're like an artist. It's like, well, you can like my picture or not like my picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you get to look at it either way. Okay. Now, but let's just say that a bunch of people use innovation brick A, and they choose, that guy said it was worth 10 BOGO bucks, but the 20 of us, we think it's worth 3 BOGO bucks.
Right.
We're giving you 3 BOGO bucks. But that establishes a connection, like a flow, right? It's not a fixed price, right?
Yeah.
So then if we build something and someone gives us 60 BOGO bucks, we say, well, we built, maybe we had to pay 7 BOGO bucks to someone else. So, and we put in a certain amount ourselves. How that determined is maybe determined by somebody else. So then whenever someone puts a BOGO buck into the system, some of it flows back to the original person who's now just sitting on the beach. It's like, hey, I'm just collecting BOGO bucks. I wrote this code. I wrote Quicksort 50 years ago, and it's still useful, so I get enough BOGO bucks.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I think that would work. Like, I don't know if it would work in the real world, but I certainly think it would be a mathematically consistent game within a limited box.
Right. Yeah.
And that would be relatively easy to program, right? Like, it wouldn't be hard to write a program, where, you do something, you give, like, one way I saw this done, and this is not my idea, but I read a paper about this a long time ago. One way to organize agents is you give every agent an income stream. Okay, and this is computer agents, not human beings, but you could do it with human beings. You give them an input stream, and they have resources which are scarce in the system, and they have to compete on price. But no one completely starves because they have an input stream.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so in that system, what the researcher, I have no idea who it was trying to do was to organize things inside a computer to properly represent like the cost of memory or hard disk space inside a computer by using market forces to set it. Like this process is running a game. It's like, I really need some memory right now. I'm willing to pay $100 fake dollars for it.
Mm-hmm.
And someone else is like, well, I'll pay $50, but I'm not going to pay 100. And so the memory goes to this. But then over time, the person that's paying 50 is like, it's been 10 minutes since I had any memory, but I've saved up 10 minutes worth of income. I'm now buy the memory that I want, and it balances out, right?
Yeah. Coming back to the bacteria analogy, I don't like the word fair, because the world isn't designed to be fair. But the reason why I tend to lean on that word fair is purely along the lines of the reason why bacteria are successful is that everyone's ideas are equally tested out, have an equal opportunity to be tested out. And I keep thinking of friends that I know in Botswana and Kenya and South Africa and other places who have tremendous ideas, who are never going to get they're never going to see the light of day, right? And these could be ideas which could revolutionize the production of renewable energies or solve climate change or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. How can we create a system which allows those ideas to quickly come out?
Yes. Although that's very different than what you were talking about at first, I think. But I completely agree. I think of it in terms of feminism, but it applies to the whole thing, right? Like I read about scientists in America from the 30s and the 40s, women scientists who had tremendous things to offer that we could have learned, and they could barely get a job. Like the only way they could get a job is if their husband had a job, or they could get a job kind of as the lowest paid research assistant in the lab or something. Even though they were writing all the papers and proving all the theorems and solving all the problems. And I know many people look at that and feel badly for the women, which I do, but I feel badly for all mankind. I'm like, holy smokes, what a waste of brain power we use by shunting that aside. And I feel the same way about this. We got 7 billion people. We've got 7 billion idea generators, and we're kind of giving 20 million of them a chance to express their ideas, maybe, right? Yeah. It's like, this is not an efficient system, right? From a bacterial point of view, it would be like you took the bacteria and you said, we're going to draw a little bitty circle, okay, and you guys get to play, and everyone else is just there to follow along, right?
Exactly.
Well, then you wouldn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, one of the things, like here's a potential way to do this, right? I think you need critics, right?
Right.
And in the make-believe world here, I want you to give me a BOGO buck because I'm a critic of these other innovation bricks, and I'm telling you this one is the best. Okay. Now, you may not believe me, but under at least some circumstances, you're going to use that innovation when you say, you know what, that dude saved me a lot of time. I'm going to give him half a BOGO buck or whatever it is, right? Okay. So the thing is, 90% of everything is crud. That's Sturgeon's law, right? And it was applied to science fiction. When people were criticizing science fiction, there's a lot of bad science fiction out there.
Right.
There's a lot of bad Victorian poetry out there, but we forget about it because it didn't make the cut to be in the canon of Elizabethan and other kinds of poetry, right? So, there probably are also a lot of stupid people in Botswana, right? I don't know. What you need is a way to foster the ideas and reward them. Okay. Now, if Botswana is playing at a low income level, that might be at a very low level until it grows out, right? But then once it's grown into the the broth of the Western world that's got a lot of nutrients in it, like suddenly a lot of energy flows in.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I don't know how to do that, but I'm willing to help you try to figure it out. Right.
Right.
I mean, I absolutely believe we are wasting. We've built a very inefficient society because we have 7 billion brains and we're not using all of them.
Yeah.
But I also believe most ideas are not very good. And it's like you have to have a growth and filter thing, and that's what these guys did with the antibiotic stripes, right?
Mm-hmm.
See, if they had put a 10,000 fatal dose right at the beginning, everyone would die, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't
Yeah,
get anything good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you need a system that allows growth, but also prunes things off,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it has to be gentle enough that some things can continue to move through the system, right? Like it would be terribly unfair, in a low resource community to say we're not going to examine what you have until you show us a working prototype. Like,
yeah.
we don't have the resources to build a working prototype. That would be clearly be such a strict mathematical filter on their output that all of their innovation would be lost.
Mm-hmm.
Right. On the other hand, you can't just say, okay, everyone who has an idea, we're going to spend an hour evaluating it, because you might spend 10,000 hours that you don't have evaluating ideas.
Yeah. And here's a extra layer of complexity that I think we should consider when we're talking about BOGO bucks and innovation bricks, is that each brick is intended to have its own currency and valuation. So it's not like my brick is worth 10 BOGO bucks and your brick is worth 5 BOGO bucks. It's my brick is worth, let's say I contributed 10 hours and therefore it's got 10 tokens of, let's say, token A. Your brick has got 20 hours and therefore you've got 20 tokens of token B. So you've got 20 tokens, I got 10 tokens, but for some reason my even though I only have 10, for whatever reason mine is far more successful, and therefore my coin, even though I've only got 10, is valued twice as much as your coins who you have 20. And so the valuation of each brick is independent of each other. And that throws in a layer of complexity, but which we know how to handle because that's how the stock market works. It's not a new problem. It's a pretty well understood way of dealing with things.
You're just creating little nano corporations for each.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And what I'm hoping is within that environment that if Sizwe from Botswana is the superstar of go-to-market strategies, then and his brick is available freely. I mean, no one would necessarily know that Sizwe is from Botswana. They just looking at the inputs and outputs and see, hey, you know what, this brick has the best input to output ratio. Let's use his work. And you actually don't know who he is or she is. Right. You just use the brick and none is the wiser. And I think, and even if we talk about the complexity of the scenario of that situation 10 years down the line, is that when you use a brick, that brick has 10,000 owners, right? There's no single owner of a particular brick. The complexity is quite high. I keep thinking, and this is the story I shared with you previously of how the system works within a very structured environment, and that is the iGEM Foundation, where it's been running for 10 years. Students have been working, developing synthetic biology projects. They are required to do so using 2 clear rules. One is documented openly. 2 is share it openly, making sure that other people can use it. So making sure it's interoperable. You define the inputs and outputs so that someone else from a different school, a different language can easily use it. And 10 years down the line, the projects are competing with some of the most well-funded research labs. But if you track and these are completely open source projects, but if you track the ownership or the contributions to those bricks, because it's been around for 10 years, there's 100, maybe 1,000 different people that have contributed to it. Mm-hmm. And the initial contributor, who may have originally had a patent on that idea and now own 50-60% of that idea, if you look at the actual contributions made, mm-hmm. you would see that actually that person owns less than a fraction of a percent, and it's all of the accumulating contributions that come into play. I keep wondering how that plays out. But
I really like this idea, but I'd like to frame it in a particular way. Okay, so if we think of each innovation brick as a nano corporation, and we, for the time being, just assume all of the shareholders of that nano corporation are angelically fair and honest amongst themselves, right? And they distribute shares correctly based on the values, which let's just set that issue aside. Then I think even though the shares inside A and B may be completely different, they're non-incommensurable, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you can still say, well, if brick A and brick B get used in different things and people pay BOGO bucks to them, BOGO bucks flow to those shareholders, irrespective of whether their shares are denominated in millions or billions, because it's just a fraction of the BOGO bucks that come in. To the people. Okay, we could build a computer simulation of that pretty easily. Okay, now the question you're asking though is, in what we think of in real life normally is that founders bring things that allow them to negotiate a position which is sort of beyond their actual input to the system, mm-hmm. right? And therefore, founders end up with a lot. And, I certainly agree. It's really weird for a company to be more than 50% owned by one person after a long period of time. I find that, I don't want to say it's wrong, but it's just, that's weird. It's like, do you value the input of all the other people so little? It's clear that's what I would call a market inefficiency. There's clearly some kind of market inefficiency going on if that's the case, Now, so the question becomes, how could you make within a brick? How could you make the nano corporation become at least more fair or more efficient in its mm-hmm. its valuation of those things? Mm-hmm. And I'm not entirely sure, but let me lay an idea on you.
Yeah.
Okay. What if that value was not determined internally? Okay. So let's say you and I together make brick A, and in 1 week, the first week it gets 10 BOGO bucks.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you leave, and I make additional improvements to it. Okay. Now I don't know how you separate that from what would have been used, right? Yeah. But in the second week, let's say the weekly income has gone up because of improvements that I made. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you and I have a way to value the improvements that I made. Mm-hmm. Right? Like in this contrived example, you can see it was making 10 BOGO bucks a week. Now it's making 15 BOGO bucks a week. Your improvement is worth so much, and we'd adjust it. Okay. Now that's not a complete system. That doesn't mean that people wouldn't disagree but it's an angle, right? Like it's a way you could say that, like it might be way too much to ask every person who gives you a BOGO buck to say, thank you. You're giving me a BOGO buck. How much do you think goes to Bodo and how much do you think goes to Rob?
Yeah.
And by the way,
yeah.
I wrote this code, he wrote that code, then he fixed that bug and we did all, it's like the transaction cost of figuring that out is extremely high.
Right.
But you could do it every once in a while, right? Like you could do it every 100 BOGO bucks. You could just say,
Yeah.
And you have an outside person do it who is not presumably influenced by either of us. Like we could even be anonymous to the outside person, right?
Yeah.
And even if the outside person gets it wrong, like they don't appreciate the value of the important proof that I did. That is, they're presumably they're not going to be wrong in a biased way. Right. The next person may be wrong in a different way and it'll all even out.
Yeah.
Right. So you can at least theoretically imagine a system and anonymity. So you want anonymity in judgment, but you don't want anonymity in rewards. Right. Okay. So when the BOGO bucks are distributed, I want there's a real distinction between how many shares you have and how many shares I have. That's, it's in a spreadsheet somewhere. There's a real difference, right? But to an outsider, they don't need to know our identities.
Right, yeah.
Right. And I do believe the world is more fair if you make it more meritocratic. And I know right now meritocracy has a bad name amongst liberal elites like me.
Yeah.
But, the problem is that word has gotten used for different things. Like, for example, I think they now do blind auditions for music positions in major orchestras, and that's got to be a huge improvement, right? And it turns out statistically it does seem less biased than the system where you view the identity of the person and then listen to and then do that. I wish, just as an aside, that journals would take the double blinding much more seriously than they do. Like I do a fair amount of academic publishing, and there are some journals that ask you not to reveal your identity. They ask for a version of your paper sanitized of the author's identity.
Wow. Okay.
So that the peer reviewers will not be biased by your identity.
Right.
Okay. Now, this is a very difficult thing because, typically you wrote 3 papers that you want to cite in this. It's like in a community, it's not that difficult for people to figure out the identity of the person, right?
Yeah.
But even so, it makes it a lot fairer, right? Like for example, if you think about a really unbalanced situation, like maybe some kid in Botswana trying to do some mathematics, right? I mean, a completely blind system might make it much more fair.
Yeah.
Even if there are other things that are unfair about it, like that maybe they don't speak English exactly the same way the peer reviewers speak English, and therefore a peer reviewer could guess their identity, right? But it still makes it more fair, right?
Yeah.
And that perhaps is a system that you could build.
How do we determine the value of a contribution? The way I was thinking of doing this, and you being a software programmer, you're probably well aware of the process of, you have a backlog of features you want to develop, and you go through your pre-sprint meeting saying, what, we've got 120 man hours this week. This item's going to be about, you'd go through a process and say, oh yeah, this feature would be 10 man hours of effort. This one is going to be 50. This one's 30. This one's whatever. That we would use that process and that mechanism to determine the value of that particular contribution. So instead of devising a new process and a new thing for us to do, we would just piggyback off an existing process that is already well structured and documented. And but again, I mean, that's a pretty hefty transaction cost on its own.
Do you mind talking about that more, or do you have an agenda for the rest of this meeting?
No. This is I like where this conversation is going.
Okay. Well, so you were talking about your firm and the difficulty that you had with that, and I can understand why it's a difficult issue. One of the, and this kind of came up in a situation that I was involved in. One of the ideas you could play with is, well, what if everyone got paid in stock? Okay, there is no money. So I can't offer you $60,000 a year because I'm not allowed to do that. Okay.
Right.
But you can be paid in stock. Now, you don't negotiate with me as the founder. You negotiate with corporation. Okay. You say, well, I'm worth 100 shares a week. And maybe you are, maybe you aren't. Maybe we say no, 50, and you say, well, I'm going to go work for another brick because I don't like it. Okay. That may not, that's at least fair, right?
Yeah.
Like you're negotiating your position in that. Okay. But the principle here that is something that's dear to my heart, and it's not used in Silicon Valley very much, let me tell you, is that a share is a share is a share. Okay.
Right.
Once you have 50 shares, they're just as good as the founder shares.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in many startup situations, there are these non-dilution clauses and preferred stock and all kinds of crap games that just are designed to like trick the system. I despise that kind of phoniness, right? I mean, if you don't think I'm worth very many shares, don't offer me very many shares. But don't offer me a lot of shares with some other joker with an anti-dilution clause you're not telling me about.
Right.
That limits the value of my shares, right? When you say you're giving me 50 shares, and to the young people listening to this audience thing, here's something. If someone offers you a certain number of options on shares, you better ask how many shares outstanding there are in the corporation. If you don't ask that, you have nothing to negotiate on. Okay, you got to understand that. Okay, so but maybe Bodo, if you did that, then you could have fairness within a corporation.
Right.
Okay, you could say, well, the founders don't have any power that the new people don't have. Right. It's like the corporation has a negotiating position, but it doesn't matter whether you're old money or new money in the corporation. It's all the same.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one thing that's interesting is, so that's a situation that's based purely on negotiation. It's not even based on value.
Yeah.
Okay. The other way that I'm playing with my mind, and forgive me if I can't articulate very well, is to try to build a system where you say, okay, this quarter, certain things have changed. Can we truly identify that the value of the corporation has gone up or down?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think maybe you could in a contrived world, but in a real world, it would be very difficult. Because it doesn't matter, how smart you are. If the recession goes down, then it goes down, and you look, like your compensation really shouldn't be tied to that. But it's also the case that if we think of everyone as producing art, like this brick is jazz and that brick is rap and this brick is classical music, right? There's nothing unfair about that. People can give their BOGO book to whatever album they want, right?
Yeah.
The problem is how much does a new innovation, go somewhere? But I think we're coming closer than in this conversation than any system I've ever heard of or thought of for something that incentivizes innovation, even amongst people who start with very little capital within the system.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you know, in the old days, what did you have? You only had the labor of your body.
Yeah.
And when we didn't have machines to do work for us, that was enough for you to feed a family of four. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you carried stuff around. Now it's very difficult to do that with just the
Mm-hmm.
labor of your body because we've made it obsolete.
Yeah.
You know? So to me, the interesting. I'm extremely busy with the COVID-19 crisis in India right now. But if it weren't for that, if I had a time machine, I would say, let's try to program this up in some way. And then,
yeah,
I'm sure I could program the corporations and the flow of BOGO bucks. That would be easy. The real hard thing is, what would the BOGO bricks be such that there would be an actual outsider who wants to put BOGO bucks in?
Well, it's I would assume that it operates very much like the stock market, where the initial way shares are rewarded is through contributions, and the contributions are likely going to be just, folks like you and I working on a project for some time until they raise their first grant, or maybe they get their first investment, or they start their first income stream. At that moment, the value of their tokens actually has some type of anchor towards real world money. Let's say there's 100,000 tokens worth of contributions within our brick, and we are donated $100,000 by the Gates Foundation. We could theoretically say one token is therefore worth $1. At that point, we have a monetary value of that token. Before then, it's almost like the pre-valuation value of a company, the pre-money valuation of a company. Then what is the incentive for someone else to buy into that? Is that a contribution can also be bought, in that a monetary contribution can be made. There's the ability for someone to look at an idea and see, what, I think this idea is going to go somewhere. I think, this guy from Botswana who is really good at creating market strategies has got a really good idea. His idea hasn't yet been found by many other people looking at the library. I'm going to give him $1,000 as an investment. He can use it to, maybe research he puts into his go-to-market strategy, whatever the case may be. I invest in.
So that's what I was going to ask. You give him $1,000. Do you get shares in his brick because of that?
Yes.
So he gets cash on the barrelhead, and he gives up some shares in his brick.
That's right.
Okay.
And that way, from then onwards, I would be rewarded for those 1,000 tokens, or whatever the valuation is, for those 1,000 tokens that I get.
Right.
And so it creates that incentive, and then you start to get secondary markets, and very much like the actual stock market, where there are people that can never actually contribute a piece of code to a software project, but still buy tokens and share and trade tokens, generating much of that secondary market. I think there's value in that type of secondary market within an innovation market.
So I think you might be right. You're taking this in a different direction than I was expecting. But let's play with that idea for a minute, okay? Now, let's say here's a picture. It probably won't work, but just picture this. Every time there's a GitHub repo, it automatically creates a nano corporation, and it automatically creates a market, and I can buy shares in that market. Okay,
Yeah.
and there's some mechanics there that we don't know about. Okay, but basically, someone creates a GitHub repo. I don't care their origin or the language they speak or their race or anything like that. I'm just like, hey, that's some good code. I think next 10 years, this code is going to be used a lot. I'm going to buy this code. And I, in essence, promote that code by virtue of the fact that I'm investing in
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, my first thought is that would be a lot more useful than idiots trading crypto coins. Right.
Right.
I mean, that is a way for people to use their brain power to speculate in an investment that actually is based on the value, or at least the probable value or the perceived value of something, rather than essentially trading on what you think people in the future are going to think is the value of the thing, right? Which is the way Bitcoin works, right? So I think that is a fascinating idea. The connections between it and reality are a little hard to come by, though, right? I mean, the thing is, let's say you and I bolt this thing onto GitHub, which you could probably do, and there's all these giant markets, and we let it out, and people play a game, and after a year, 10,000 investors hold portfolios in all of these free software things that are potentially used by all these people. Where does the first dollar come in? Right? Because in most free software situations, you don't have a monopoly. Like you don't have to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, see, that's where I would say my luxury idea comes in. You basically just pass the hat around, right? You basically say, every one of these projects, out of the goodness of your heart, give us some real dollars.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I give $20 to, let's say, Bootstrap, or jQuery, something I use all the time, right? Yeah. So I'm willing to give tiny amount of my income to support jQuery, right? Well, now we have a system where that money flows, out to a bunch of people who invested in things, but also programmed.
Right.
Right. And some of that money is rewarding those systems. Okay. That's the only way that I can see you get this tie from this mathematical market system to a real world.
What I was thinking was, and I know this adds another layer of complexity, and that when you create your brick for the first time, you get to choose out of 3 options. One is as soon as there's revenue, as soon as there's a grant being given to this micro corporation or whatever the case may be, there's 100% split of whatever that contribution is to the shareholders. So that's option 1 is 100% direct split of that value to all of the token holders. The other side of the spectrum is 0% of that goes to any other contributors. That it all goes to the creators of that brick, whoever set it up initially. And then the third is a mixture between the two. Now, and you can say, you know what, I'm going to set it at 50%. 50% goes to me and 50% goes to all the contributors. Now, me as a contributor, I can then choose to work for bricks that are giving me the best reward. I can choose to contribute to bricks that are giving me the best reward, or I can choose to copy and go a different way. here's the scenario is, let's say I've got a brick and I'm an asshole. I choose to say, you know, I want to retain 90% of the value, and I'll share 10% with whoever wants to contribute. But because it's within the library, someone else can copy that piece of work. Now, I don't really care that someone else is copied, because now I own 50% of their brick, right? Mm-hmm. But they set up their brick to be very different. They are saying they're going to share 90% of any income, revenue, whatever, directly with all the contributors, and they're only going to retain 10%. So out of these two bricks, which brick is more likely to attract the most developers, the most innovation, the most contributions? Brick B would. And right. so theoretically it would balance out, it would create this mechanism that would reward those that are more open, and so it would reward bricks that are more open, but it would also give the bricks that are more open the more resources. Therefore, and again, this needs to be simulated. Would it be better off for someone to be open than it would be for them to be closed? Is the question mark.
Well, so that's actually kind of a fascinating idea, and I like it. I wonder about it, though. I guess I hadn't really thought of the idea of copying a brick one for one with no changes, right? So what I was imagining was that someone would build on a brick and they would voluntarily give tokens to the brick that they built on. So it's not just the contributors, but like if you and I are writing a program, we use jQuery, we give a certain number of tokens to jQuery because it's valuable. Now,
right.
The difference between that and the way closed software works is jQuery has no say in that. We can choose to give them money, or we can choose, but we can still use the software.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Okay. What Richard Stallman, who's one of my heroes, and the Free Software Foundation would say is, well, you have to give them the code, but you don't have to be friendly to them. You don't have to support them. You don't have to help them fix their bugs. That's not your moral obligation, right? Like if they want that, they can pay you for it, right? And that works economically. It's a very reasonable economic system, but right. I don't think that's what you're striving for either in this system, quite. So I'm a little befuddled as to what you would do about a pure copy. And see, it's one thing to say, well, we're going to make a copy because the original owner is too stingy. That's one thing. But it's another thing to say, for example, well, Bodo and Rob wrote a brick and they're only 2 people, but we want to share it amongst 100 people. So we copy their work, and now we look like we're more open because we've got 100 people, but in reality, we're not planning to make any actual innovations. Right, but to the outsider, it looks like it's open, but in reality, they're not going to do anything.
Going back to the example where, and let's make it practical. Let's say I developed an oxygen concentrator, and I got it working in Zimbabwe using locally available parts from Zimbabwe, and I've got my business, and that's it. And then someone from India, because they have the crisis there, they decide, I'm going to copy this brick and I'm going to implement it in India. Now, in Zimbabwe, I already have an existing infrastructure, I have an existing revenue stream, and therefore the value of my tokens are let's say valued at $1 per token.
Okay.
Now, the person from India hasn't yet established anything. So they have copied the idea, and they already have 200 tokens, of which I own 100, because that's the transaction. but the value of their tokens is 0 because they haven't executed. And it comes down to the point that everyone has good ideas, but good ideas are worthless. It's all about execution. And so 2 equal ideas are not equally valued because it's the execution that matters and not the idea. There's still the chance that even though my brick, I only am sharing 10% of the value with the ecosystem, maybe I'm just a genius at execution. Mm-hmm. And everyone else that copies my brick, maybe I built a brand around me, right? And even though I only share 10% of the value, everyone wants to work on my brick because I'm really good at executing, compared to someone else who copies the brick and is sharing 90%, but can't execute or doesn't have a brand or whatever the case may be. I don't yet know how that all plays out, but that is one thing to consider, is that the value of the bricks is determined by the execution of that idea, as opposed to the idea itself.
Well, and that's kind of the way free software works, right? You know, I mean, if your oxygen concentrator were pure software and it were published under the GPL, a company in India could take it and immediately start using it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if people are paying you for something, that firm wouldn't immediately get half of your business, right? I mean, they're paying you for a reason which is not embodied in the software. Mm-hmm. Okay. And in the case of an oxygen concentrator, the truth is there's stuff that's not in software which is important, like knowledge about the physical design, the maintenance, your ability to make repairs, your ability to offer technical support, all of those things. And that's not even counting medical regulation, which would be another thing. So as an aside, I would say if I gave you a very detailed design of an oxygen concentrator that I had a successful business around, I would only be giving you 1/5 of my business.
Yeah.
Like the rest of it, you couldn't just create a business and compete with me immediately.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's not to say that I wouldn't be giving you something valuable. Yeah. Right. A lot of work went into that design, but it's not even a majority of the business. Okay. But I don't know exactly. See, your idea that the way you phrased that was you're selling the innovation brick of the oxygen concentrator to India, which means they can't copy it. And what I was setting up a luxurious world where they can copy it, and it's up to them to donate to you some number of their shares out of the goodness of their heart, based on the value that they perceive. Okay, those are 2 different models. I'm not saying one is better than the other. That's just those 2 very different ways of thinking about it, right?
Is it selling? Is it selling, or is it because you making the copy, you haven't yet executed on the idea, and technically you're buying it because you're giving 50% of the potential value to the person you're copying it from, but the whole idea is that, well, the assumption is that you're not just going to copy it and never update it. You're never going to contribute to that brick you just copied. So the moment you copy it, yes, that the other person owns 50% of it. But as soon as you start contributing, their 50% starts to dilute. And you get more and more of that as you contribute to it. So they only have 50% the moment it's copied, but as soon as people start to contribute to that idea, their token value or their tokens within that fall below that 50% mark. And then it becomes like a GitHub repository that you flagged, in that you've got, let's say someone made a fork of your work, and you want to, you know, track what they're actually going to do with it, because they may have a really good idea on where they go with it. So every time someone makes a copy of your work, you can choose to be updated if they contribute to their brick, and then that starts to notify you. You know what? This oxygen concentrator in India is using this really cool compressor that I didn't even know existed, and they're achieving far better performance and efficiency than I am. And I'll get pinged, and at that moment, the reverse takes place, in that here now I can copy part of their brick back to mine, and the reverse transaction takes place just for that part of the copy. That's where it gets quite complex, and I haven't yet figured out how that scenario would work. But the intention is, if you run the experiments and you just think about how many times people make copies, and you just look at a GitHub repository, you look how many times people make copies and pull in code from here and there and this and everywhere. Your GitHub repository probably contains code from 100,000 different contributions over the last 30 years. And so that GitHub repository, you could think of it as a corporation, now has 100,000 employees who are contributing or own some part of that brick. But now your business contains many bricks, and therefore your legal entity contains hundreds of fractured legal entities, each of which contain hundreds of individuals that own tokens within those fractured legal entities. And so it becomes a really big mess, but I think a really interesting mess, in that everyone's contribution is rewarded really interestingly. The incentives are aligned for you to continually update your innovation, you know, hone it in, optimize it as much as you possibly can, because that means the more people would start to grab that piece of innovation, and suddenly your innovation is used by 100,000 fractured entities, and they're being recombined in another 100,000 ways, and suddenly you have your fractions of share, or your fractions of tokens within legal entities is growing exponentially.
Okay, well, so I think you said one thing that's making it a little more complicated than it needs to be.
Okay.
Right. I mean, if I have a GitHub repo and I've brought in code from 20 projects, each of which brings in code from 15 projects, each of which brings in code from 10 projects, right? There are 1,000 projects there. But if I give to those 20 projects a certain number of shares of my corporation, those sub-projects own shares of those corporations.
That's right.
Therefore, the person at the bottom of the chain simply owns shares that may own a lot of shares in other corporations, but it's not particularly complicated mathematically.
You're right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's that part is fairly simple. Okay. What I think is what I'm struggling with is, you're using the word brick and you're using the word contribution, and you want people to be compensated for contributions. But to my mind, everything's perfect if you don't look inside a brick. Like you have a system that it all works. Okay. The problem you have is to do that. And I want to propose, just as a thought experiment, you say there are no contributions, there are only bricks. If the oxygen concentrator in India makes an improvement, it must be treated as a brick. Okay, like a brick is, and this is something you do kind of in agile computer programming. Right. A user story is the unit of work.
Yeah.
Okay. In your system, the brick is the unit of ownership, for example. Okay. And now if you do my luxury thing, you don't necessarily have to do this, but let's say you do that. Okay. Well, so let's say someone in India makes some improvement to an oxygen concentrator. If it's not in a brick, it's difficult to reuse.
Right.
Right. It's like now I have to do work. I have to go figure out their improvement and put it in
yeah.
here, and it's like there's work. Okay. Now, if I had to do all that work, I made a contribution and they made a contribution. Now we can fight over who made the bigger contribution because they didn't like hand it to me on a platter. Right.
Yeah.
It's like I had to do this work.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
It might be going too far because it might be sort of insisting that every contribution be well documented, have clear inputs and outputs, and be reusable, maybe even testable or whatever. But I mean, you can clearly imagine a system like that where you basically say, yeah, there are a lot of improvements, but if they're not big, no one's going to take the time to turn them into a brick. And that's okay, because if they're not big, they're not worth the transaction cost of figuring all this stuff out. Okay. But nonetheless, there are some things, like a better dehumidifier, like that's a brick. Okay. Now, if we think about that, now the question becomes, well, what happened to the African firm that sort of originated the oxygen concentrator in the first place, right? And what you're saying is they have to buy the right to use the new brick from the owners of the brick. In my luxury-based system, they would just start using it and give some shares on voluntarily to that person. Okay, but either way you do it, the new brick owner gets something of value, right? Like they get some shares in the new thing. Okay. Now you've got 2 oxygen concentrators. Money flows in to purchase oxygen concentrators. Okay. Does it flow in because this one is better or just because it's closer? Doesn't matter. It might like if you're in Africa, you buy the African one. If you're in India, you buy the Indian one. But either way, money flows in. Now, some of that money goes to, Linus Torvald for writing Git, maybe. And some of it goes to the Indian firm that made the better dehumidifier, which is installed on the African firm thing. But then they turn around because 50% of their shares are owned by the African firm because they created the thing in the first place. And it all kind of just magically works out. Right. Like it becomes very hard for a human being to compute which percentage they own, but a computer could do it lickety split. Right. So I think that could work. It's kind of like, I'm not a big fan of cryptocurrencies, as you can tell. Right. But they have the potential to democratize banking. They're not being used that way. They're being used for speculative investment, but they have the potential to democratize banking. That's what's beautiful about them.
Yeah.
What you're proposing here is an attempt to democratize this. Like but it's in the United States, it's not very hard to start a corporation. You can do like $500. Okay. I think in Europe, it's a lot harder, but in the United States, it's not very hard. But now what we're basically saying is, well, that transaction cost needs to go to 0, right? Like we need to just nano corporations just come into existence without us even thinking about it, and stuff flows around that way. And I think in a way, your big contribution here might, that might be your big contribution here to have attempted. Well, not attempted. You've made a plausible structure which democratizes innovation by ephemeralizing or making lighter existing mathematical and corporate structures we already have. I mean, you didn't invent the corporation, but you're reinventing the corporation by making it a tiny, tiny little structure that kind of manages itself, right?
Right.
And see, if you look at most GitHub repos, they don't have a legal organization behind them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if the person who owns the repo gets pissed off at the programmers, they can just delete the repo and you say,
Yeah.
I'm taking my ball and going home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other repos are owned by a corporation, and an individual does not have a right to do that. The corporation would have to decide to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, there would be no harm if people were willing to do that. You could have like an area of GitHub where it's the normal rules, and in this area we play by the, let's say, the Dev4X innovation rules. And when you play by those rules, when you create a repo, a tiny corporation is automatically created, and an accounting mechanism for accounting the tokens is automatically created.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And, kind of without having to think about very much of it, systems flow around.
What is the tangible next step that you would recommend?
Well, the way I've always approached this in the past, what I would do is I would write a example library in JavaScript that runs in a browser with a demo that can run in a browser where no one has to download any software. It would just be, you could just show it working. Okay. There would be a simulation of the bricks and a simulation of purchase decisions, and it would graphically show, you drop a BOGO buck in here, and like a pachinko machine, the dollars flow to the contributors over here. And then you say, but what if brick B decides to start using code C instead of code D? How does that change it? Well, then it changes, that'd be simple. And then I would use that to write a chapter in your book.
Interesting. I think that's a beautiful way forward. Yeah. And even before I start coding, because I'm not good at coding, I could try and simulate things, and different rules. Yeah. Pen and paper or spreadsheets, and try and model it out on a bunch of different spreadsheets.
Yeah.
I think that's the next step. I'm going to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to draw boxes and arrows and kind of figure it out.